March 5, 1936, Eastleigh Aerodrome, Southampton. Cold wind cuts across the grass runway. A pale man in a dark overcoat stands behind the control tower window, one hand gripping the frame for support. His name is Reginald Joseph Mitchell, age 41, weight down to 126 pounds, cancer eating through his colon and rectum. The doctors gave him 6 months, 2 years ago. Below him, on the tarmac, sits prototype K-5054, a fighter aircraft with wings shaped like nothing the Royal Air Force has ever seen, elliptical, graceful, deadly. In 4 years, planes exactly like this one will face the Luftwaffe over the English Channel. In 4 years, Winston Churchill will tell Parliament that never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. But Reginald Mitchell won't be there to hear it. He'll be 3 years dead, buried in a South Stoneham cemetery, while his Spitfire writes history without him. To understand why this moment matters, why a dying man gambled everything on a set of wing curves, you need to go back to 1931. The British Empire still colored half the world map red, but its air force was flying biplanes that looked like refugees from the Great War, fabric-covered, double-winged, fixed landing gear. They topped out at 180 miles per hour on a good day. Meanwhile, in Germany, engineers were sketching monoplanes in secret. In Italy, Mach-E seaplanes were shattering speed records. Britain was falling behind, and everyone except the Air Ministry seemed to know it. Mitchell knew. He'd been proving it since 1922, when Supermarine Aviation hired him as chief designer at age 27. No formal university degree, just a grammar school education in Stoke-on-Trent, an apprenticeship at a locomotive works, and obsessive mind that saw airflow the way Mozart heard music. He started with flying boats, passenger seaplanes for island hopping. Competent work, forgettable. Then Jacques Schneider, a French financier, established a trophy, a competition for the fastest seaplane on Earth. Mitchell saw it not as a race, but as a laboratory. Speed meant survival. Speed meant the future. Between 1927 and 1931, Mitchell designed 3 Supermarine S-Series races, each one pushed further: S5, S6, S6B, streamlined floats, retractable radiators, Rolls-Royce engines tuned to the edge of mechanical suicide. On September 13, 1931, Flight Lieutenant John Boothman flew the S6B at 340.08 miles per hour over the Solent, a world record. Britain won the Schneider Trophy permanently. Mitchell's name appeared in newspapers. The Air Ministry, finally paying attention, issued specification F7/30, design us a modern fighter. 8 companies submitted proposals. Mitchell's first attempt, the Type 224, was a disaster. Gull wings, fixed landing gear, steam-cooled engine. It flew like a brick wrapped in canvas. The ministry rejected it. Competitors whispered that the seaplane man didn't understand fighters. Then, in 1933, Mitchell collapsed during a design meeting. Abdominal pain, bleeding. Surgeons opened him up and found cancer metastasized through his lower intestine. They removed 18 inches of colon, stitched him back together, and told his wife Florence, months, maybe a year if we're lucky. Mitchell heard the prognosis, nodded, and asked when he could return to the drawing board. His answer came in 1934, when the Air Ministry issued specification F37/34, a new fighter requirement, this time serious. War with Germany wasn't a question of if, but when. Mitchell, skeletal and exhausted, decided this would be his last design. It had to count. He started with the wings. Every aeronautical engineer in Britain used straight or tapered designs, predictable, safe.
Mitchell sketched ellipses, curves that distributed lift evenly across the span, minimizing drag. His stress engineers said the compound curves would be nearly impossible to manufacture. Mitchell replied, "Then we'll make it possible." He specified a thin cross-section, just 13% thickness to chord ratio at the root, which meant speed, but also structural risk. One calculation error, one weak spar, and the wing would fold in a dive. He checked the math 17 times. The engine choice was obvious, the Rolls-Royce Merlin, a new liquid-cooled V12 producing 1,030 horsepower, but mounting it required innovation. Mitchell designed a streamlined cowling so tight that mechanics joked you'd need a child to reach the spark plugs. The radiator went under the wing in a recessed duct, cooling without drag penalty. The propeller, a 3-blade variable pitch unit from de Havilland, each blade twisted to bite the air at optimal angles. The fuselage, a monocoque structure, all metal, load-bearing skin instead of internal framework, lighter, stronger, expensive. Supermarine's accountants protested the costs. The Air Ministry hadn't officially ordered the plane yet. Mitchell's response, build it anyway. He mortgaged the company's future on a prototype the government might reject. His team worked through 1935. Riveters, sheet metal workers, draftsmen copying Mitchell's blueprints until their eyes burned. Mitchell himself came to the factory floor less and less. The cancer was winning. Some days he couldn't stand for more than an hour. He'd sit on a stool, pale as paper, marking up drawings with a pencil that trembled in his grip. March 11, 1937, Reginald Mitchell died at his home in Portswood, age 42, cause colorectal cancer. The obituaries called him a brilliant designer. The aviation journals praised his Schneider Trophy victories. A few mentioned the new fighter entering production. No one knew yet that the Spitfire would matter.
No one could predict the summer of 1940. 3 years after Mitchell's death, Adolf Hitler's Luftwaffe controlled the skies over Europe. France had fallen in 6 weeks, the Low Countries crushed, Norway occupied. Only Britain remained, and Hermann Goering promised Churchill he'd bomb the island into submission. Operation Eagle Attack, destroy the Royal Air Force, then invade across the Channel. The Luftwaffe had numbers, 1,400 bombers, 1,200 fighters. Britain had 640 fighters, and half of them were obsolete Hurricanes. The other half were Spitfires, Mitchell's Spitfires. August 15, 1940, the largest Luftwaffe raid yet. 520 aircraft crossing the Channel in 3 waves. RAF Fighter Command scrambled everything. Spitfire squadrons from 11 Group climbed to intercept over Kent. The Messerschmitt Bf-109s, Germany's best fighters, expected easy kills. They'd shredded Polish PZLs, French Morans, and early Hurricanes. But when the 109s met Spitfires at 18,000 feet, something changed. The elliptical wings gave the British fighter a tighter turning radius. The Merlin engine pulled harder in climbs. The 8.303 Browning machine guns, 4 per wing, fired 1,200 rounds per minute combined. Luftwaffe pilots radioed back to their bases. "We have encountered a new enemy aircraft, very fast, very maneuverable, difficult to shoot down." The pilots who flew Spitfires spoke about them in a language reserved for lovers or religion. Flight Lieutenant Geoffrey Wellham, age 18, later wrote, "She was alive. You didn't fly a Spitfire, you wore her." Another pilot, squadron leader Brian Lane, called it the most beautiful killing machine ever built. They described the feeling of pushing the throttle forward, feeling 1,175 horsepower pull them into a near-vertical climb. The way the ailerons responded instantly, like the plane could read their thoughts. The way sunlight hit the wings during a victory roll, those elliptical curves catching the light like a promise kept. And this is where the story takes a turn no one expected. But before we get to that, if you're finding this untold history as fascinating as I am, drop a comment below. Which engineer or inventor from the World Wars deserves more recognition? Hit that like button too. It tells YouTube to show this to more people who care about the names history forgot. By September 1940, the Luftwaffe had lost 1,733 aircraft. The RAF lost 915. Hitler postponed the invasion indefinitely. Britain survived. Churchill addressed Parliament. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. He meant the pilots, the 2,927 men of fighter command who flew against impossible odds. But the few were also one man, buried in Southampton, who never heard the Merlin engines screaming over London, who never saw a Spitfire silhouetted against the setting sun, who never knew his dying gamble had saved a nation. Florence Mitchell, Reginald's widow, watched the victory parades alone. She saw the Spitfires flying in formation over Buckingham Palace. She heard the cheers. She knew her husband had built those wings, but the crowds chanting in the streets didn't know his name. The newspapers credited British engineering ingenuity and RAF determination. Some mentioned Supermarine. Almost none mentioned Mitchell. Florence kept a photograph on her mantel. Reginald in 1935, gaunt but smiling, standing beside a wooden wing mock-up in the factory. She told friends he knew it would work, he just didn't know how much. The Spitfire went on to become the only Allied fighter in continuous production throughout the entire war. 20,351 aircraft built, over 24 variants. Rolls-Royce kept improving the Merlin, eventually hitting 2,050 horsepower. The elliptical wings never changed. Mitchell had got them perfect on the first try. Spitfires flew in every theater: Europe, North Africa, the Pacific, the Eastern Front. They shot down 1,887 German aircraft confirmed. They intercepted V-1 flying bombs over England. They escorted bombers deep into the Reich. And in every cockpit, pilots flew a machine designed by a man who knew he'd never see it matter. After the war, Britain finally remembered. In 1945, the Royal Air Force named its Advanced Fighter Tactics School after Mitchell. In 1986, Southampton erected a statue. Reginald Mitchell, thin and determined, staring at a model Spitfire. The inscription reads, "Designer of the Spitfire, his genius saved a nation." 50 years too late. Florence had died in 1974, never seeing the statue. She spent her final years answering letters from Spitfire pilots, men who wrote to thank the widow of a man they'd never met. One letter from a Battle of Britain veteran said simply, "I owe him my life. Please tell him if you can." Wars demand machines, and machines demand dreamers. The dreamers rarely see the outcome. They die in hospital beds, at drawing boards, in factory fires, alone with blueprints and regrets. Reginald Mitchell designed a fighter so perfect that the RAF used it for 16 years without major redesign. He gave Britain the tool it needed to survive its darkest hour, and he did it while dying, while in pain, while knowing he'd never see the miracle. The engineer who saved Britain never heard the thank you. The plane that defined British resistance was built by a ghost. Today, 60 Spitfires still fly. Air shows, museums, private collections. When a Merlin engine starts up, that snarling, unmistakable roar, crowds go silent.
Old men who were children during the Blitz wipe their eyes. The sound isn't just mechanical, it's memory, it's deliverance, it's the voice of a machine that refused to let tyranny win. And somewhere in that sound, if you listen close enough, is the echo of a dying man who bet everything on a curve, a wing, and a future he'd never see. The designer who raced against death, the fighter that raced against the Luftwaffe, the legacy that outlived them both.